Good evening, tributes, and welcome back to Tales of the Hunger Games After 100. My name is Robo, and I will be your host for today's episode. As usual, I'd like to thank the wonderful Andrew Maclaine for his amazing artwork towards the video, as well as Christian Blanco for creating the series in the first place. I'd also like all of you viewers to wish Lauren McCouch good mental health as she ends Panem Reborn at file 111. I'd also like to apologize for not uploading very frequently, as there was some confusion about my uploading and this series with Lauren's series. And you may have been able to tell, but I have a new microphone currently. I'd like to thank all of you for continuing to beg me for a microphone, but also just for your general support on this series. As usual, I'd also like to thank Red Dragon 0814 for helping me proofread and edit the series. Thank you very much. And without further ado, let's get straight into the video. Vulcan Helix, victor of the 105th Hunger Games, arrived in District 7 after a long day of reapings. Vulcan was clearly ready to rest. However, he kept his composure in District 7 as Mayor Wood gave his speech. After Mayor Wood had finished talking about the importance of the games, the reaping began. Lawrence stated that District 7 had not managed to produce a victor in quite a long time, and despite a lot of tributes coming close, none had yet managed to procure the crown. Clearly, fans of District 7 were beginning to feel fed up due to the district's lack of success. Vulcan began by selecting name from the female reaping pool, which he announced to be 17-year-old Copacia Grande. The camera quickly found a girl with dark brown hair, which contrasted with her pale skin. Copacia sighed before walking up to the stage without embarrassing herself. On the stage, Copacia shook hands with Vulcan, before standing sadly as Vulcan reached into the male reaping bowl. After some rummaging, Vulcan pulled a name, which he revealed to be 16-year-old Prick Ashley. A large murmur blew through the crowd, followed by lots of protesting. A large group of people were holding down Rick, stopping him from reaching the stage. Once the peacekeepers present readied their guns, however, they allowed Prick to walk to the stage. Prick goes off a moderate build with ginger hair and brown eyes. Lauren quickly questioned why Prick was so popular. However, Ken quickly told her to shut up, as they listened to the shouting going on in the reaping square. Many adults and youths alike were shouting that they should never desert Prick, which seemed to make him smile from the stage. The reaping was hastily dismissed, amidst lots of shouting and complaints from the crowd. Inside the town hall, Copacia was visited by her father, who wished her luck in the games and told her to do anything she could, even if it meant killing the district celebrity. This seemed to make Copacia lighten up, and after a hug, she headed for the train. Meanwhile, 3 additional peacekeepers were brought into Prick's visitor room, due to the large number of people attempting to visit him. In the end, he was only visited by his family and close friends, who gave him advice and promised that they would find him sponsors. Prick thanked them before departing for the train. Once on the train, the tributes were met by Asha Seidel, victor of the 78th Hunger Games. Asha introduced herself before telling them to demonstrate their talents to her. Copacia immediately reached for a nearby hatchet, which had been brought in, and threw it at the turkey on the buffet. The hatchet sunk deeply into the turkey, which caused Asha to nod in approval. Prick, on the other hand, began to sing, and after a while, Asha began to laugh while Copacia seemed shocked. Upon realizing that Asha was laughing, Prick stopped singing before picking up an axe and slicing the turkey in half. This caused Asha to stop laughing, and after thinking for a bit, she told them to go to bed. Although it was late, Copacia and Prick both seemed surprised at Asha's command, and both obeyed and headed to their carriages, while Asha poured herself some red wine and turned on the TV to a restricted channel. In the morning, the train arrived at Snow Station, where many Capitol viewers and fans were waiting. Copacia asked Asha what they should do before getting off the train. However, Asha simply winked and told her to be herself. The train doors then opened, which saw the tributes descend the steps and onto the platform. On the platform, Copacia and Asha were both mainly ignored. However, Prick was immediately bombarded with Capital fans, who asked him many questions about the upcoming games as well as his life in District 7. As more and more fans crowded around Prick, he seemed rather shocked, as Asha led Copacia towards the awaiting limousine, while muttering about Prick's celebrity status. Once peacekeepers had intervened, Prick was finally able to join Copacia and Asha in the limousine, which promptly led them to their apartment. Once the limousine had stopped, peacekeepers were forced to intervene again and hold viewers back, as many fans were clearly desperate to catch a sight of Prick. As Prick exited with Asha and Copacia in tow, the crowd grew louder and began to take photos. However, the peacekeepers allegedly fired their guns to stop the crowds from reaching the tributes. Behind Prick, Copacia and Asha had a whispering conversation, where they allegedly talked about Prick and his many fans. Asha told Copacia that she should attempt to ally with Prick if possible, as he would be hoarding all the sponsors this year. Inside the apartment, Bravo Malayev and Aroma Paddock were already waiting for them. And as soon as they saw Prick, they ran over and shook hands. Prick seemed shocked. However, they quickly explained that they had seen his singing go viral on Capital TV, and announced that they were loyal fans. This seemed to shock Prick even more. However, the stylist quickly took Prick and Copacia's measurements, while mostly bombarding Prick with questions. This seemed to amuse Asha, who spent the time talking with Copacia while the stylist sketched designs. During this time, Asha attempted to turn on Capital TV to rewatch Reapings. However, even Reaping Recap was broadcasting news about Prick. Asha swore before smashing the controller and walking out of the apartment while Copacia looked on in shock at Prick, the stylists, and Asha. That night, the stylist spent lots of time with the tributes, most notably Prick, while Asha was known to have smoked her pipe in the hallway outside. The following morning, most channels were still airing news about Prick. However, after a lot of swearing, Asha had finally found one that broadcasted the live reaping for District 6. Vulcan seemed shocked at the amount of human zombies that were present in the square, and despite Mayor Ford's best efforts to keep the population from doing embarrassing things, multiple youths puked on each other while others fainted. Vulcan was known to ask Ford how this was humanly possible. However, instead of answering the question, Ford told Vulcan to draw a name. Vulcan obeyed and walked over to the female reaping bull, before yelling into the microphone that 18-year-old Sydney Quain was the reap tribute. There seemed to be only a couple of minor reactions to Vulcan's yelling. However, after a while of searching, peacekeepers found a tall girl with dark black hair in the back of the enclosure who appeared to be sick. Upon realizing she had been reaped, Sydney immediately screamed and no longer appeared to be faking sick. Cindy was quickly taken to the stage, where she shook hands with a reluctant-looking Vulcan and stood silently. Vulcan then reached into the male reaping bull, where he drew a slip of paper belonging to 14-year-old Jordan Swift. Cameras quickly focused on a short boy standing in one of the front rows. Jordan did not appear to realize that he was reaped, and only after he was standing on the stage did he realize something was happening. This seemed to gross Lauren out, while Ken scoffed at the district's population. Mayor Ford then stepped forward after Jordan had shaken Vulcan's hand. Ford wished that the odds would be in the district's favor before dismissing the population before he could be more embarrassed. Inside the town hall, Sydney was visited by her mother only, as her father had died in an accident a few years back. Her mother told her that she was proud Sydney had managed to stay off morphling for the past years, and that she was allowed to have some on the train. To this, Sydney smiled and told her mother that she loved her, and after a hug, Sydney departed for the train. Jordan was not visited by anyone. He seemed too drunk to even respond to the peacekeepers, and his parents were allegedly still recovering from the previous night's festivities. Therefore, Jordan was taken to the train by peacekeepers after the meeting time was over. On the train, Madison Hawker, victor of the 85th Hunger Games, immediately walked into the carriage, and upon seeing Jordan and Sydney not interacting with each other, she appeared to breathe in relief. Madison then walked over to a drowsy Jordan, and before he knew what was happening, Madison had dumped a vial of liquid into his mouth. Jordan immediately appeared sick. However, shortly after, he slowly dozed off and began to sleep. Madison then sighed again, before looking at Sydney and pulling out a morphling testing device. Instinctively, Sydney took a few steps backward. However, Madison stuck it in her mouth, and once the test glowed red, she sighed, before tossing it into a nearby wastebasket. Madison then formally introduced herself to Sydney, and told her that she had to test for morphling as it would allow her to better understand her tributes. Madison then indicated Jordan, who was now slowly coming to. Madison explained that she had given Jordan an antidote for morphling. Sydney seemed to understand, and for most of the train ride, Madison briefed her on what to expect, as well as tips for the games, while Jordan moaned and groaned on the couch. Once the train had arrived in Snow Station, there were barely any fans waiting. Most of those present were simply zealous admirers of District 6 or simply mechanics, hoping for advice. Madison did not allow her tributes to interact with any of them, and led them directly to the limousine. She was also known as to have kept an eye on Jordan at all times. At the apartment, Madison quickly called their stylist, Pop Harrington, over to the apartment. Once at the apartment, Pop greeted Madison before taking the tribute's measurements. After some pondering, Pop sketched out a design of a dark gray outfit themed around asphalt. Madison seemed unhappy with the design, however she let it slide. Pop then went on to work on designing the outfits, while Madison gave Jordan the same talk she gave Sydney. However, she spoke much more sternly to him. In the apartment above, Asha was forced to shut the blinds due to the large number of news helicopters outside the apartment window. She seemed very annoyed at Prick's popularity. Once Bravo and Aroma had finished designing the chariot parade outfits, Asha approved them and left the apartment without another word. Both Bravo and Aroma seemed surprised, but they regained their composure and chatted with Capacia and Prick for the remainder of the day. The next night, the chariot parade was held. Many armed peacekeepers were placed around the avenue, since the attendance had nearly doubled this year. It is speculated that most of this was due to Prick's involvement. While waiting for the chariot call, Prick spent his time stroking the horses while humming to himself. He seemed to draw a lot of stares from other tributes. However, this did not seem to bother him. Sapphire, of 1, even yelled at Prick to shut up. However, Prick ignored her and continued to hum. Capacia was clearly embarrassed by what Prick was doing, so she sat down on the chariot and appeared to hide her face until the chariot call sounded. One chariot in front of them, Jordan was seen to be pestering Madison for morphling tablets, which Madison refused to give him. As Madison lectured Jordan on the importance of staying off morphling, Sydney examined the other tributes. Bulger, of 9, was burly, however he did not appear to intimidate Sydney, while Mia, of 3, was small and did not show her face much. When the chariot call sounded, the couriers got up front, got one last laugh at Prick, before getting on their carriages. The parade began with Elmas and Sapphire, both of 1, who were dressed in scarlet robes, along with lots of makeup. Wolf Anderson stated that he approved of this outfit, however he thought the makeup was poorly done, which Lauren seemed to agree to. After the ones, Dovis and Yunnan, both 2, rode down. This year, the district stylists seemed to have taken the criticism personally. Therefore, instead of wearing armor, Dovis and Yunnan were dressed in a golden tunic and gown, along with matching fascinators. Following them, Blood and Mia were dressed in blinding lights, which Wolf criticized, as it seemed too bright for the eyes. However, Khen stated that he approved of the lights, as they seemed like a nice additional decoration. After the 3s, Aba of 4 covered her face with a shell attached to her outfit. Once Jordan and Sydney's carriage had entered the avenue of tributes, Capitol viewers no longer appeared to be paying attention to the tributes present, but instead appeared to be waiting for the tributes from 7. To fill in this awkward moment, Lauren commented that she thought the texturing on the asphalt outfits of District 6 was done perfectly. However, Wolf pointed out that the texture was not in fact that of asphalt, but in fact that of concrete instead. But before Wolf could finish the sentence, cheers in the avenue of tributes immediately erupted, as Copassia and Prick's carriage came down the avenue. Viewers began to chant Prick, while Wolf commented that the outfits of District 7 were very exquisite. This year, Bravo and Aroma had designed special clothes that had patterns which looked like the patterns on wood. Cheers reached a crescendo as the chariot turned the corner, and despite Wolf loudly yelling about how good District 8's outfits looked, the citizens only seemed to care about Prick. Even Copassia seemed stunned at the amount of attention Prick was getting. That night, it was unsurprisingly announced that District 7 had received over 97% of the votes for Best Dressed, even though many critics stated that Ava Barrett had done a much better job of designing. In the morning, the tributes were taken down to the training center, where Khen was waiting for them. Khen warmly welcomed them, and after explaining the rules of training, he dismissed them to whichever station they wished to train in. Before Prick had even approached the station, Yunnan of 2 had approached and challenged him to a fight in the sword station. Prick politely declined, but Khen quickly approached and dragged him to the station. After being dressed appropriately, Prick and Yunnan fought, and although Prick managed to put up a fight, Yunnan ended up beating him with a lopsided score of 15-2. Prick then undressed and was ready to head to the axe station. However, he seemed clearly intimidated by both Dovis 2 and Sapphire of 1 training by his side. Copassia had originally headed toward the axes station. However, upon seeing Elmas of 1 approaching and counting the axes, she turned around and walked over to the survival station, where she attempted to memorize the names and qualities of some of the plants in the station. After some time, she looked back to see Prick practicing in the axe station. At first, Copassia appeared ready to work there. However, upon seeing the remainder of the careers also present, she continued to work in the survival station for the remainder of the morning. Jordan had approached the camouflage station the second Khen dismissed the tributes, and there he decorated himself with a variety of different colors. During his time in the station, he was known to have drawn in a lot of stares from tributes around him, as he was allegedly moaning. On the other hand, Sydney had traveled around the training center, and after being prompted, she worked in the electrical station with Blood and Mia, both of 3. Sydney spoke with them about mechanics in District 6. However, after some time, Blood explicitly stated that he was not interested in any potential alliances, which caused Sydney to work on her own for the remainder of the morning. During lunch, Madison advised Jordan to actually work on a skill which may be useful in the arena, while telling Sydney to work with weapons for some time. Jordan did not appear to be listening, which clearly frustrated Madison, but Sydney agreed and respected Madison's advice. On the other hand, Asha did not eat lunch with the tributes, but instead spent her time watching adult-only Capital TV channels in the mentoring gallery. Copassia and Prick did not talk much during lunch, but they did spend a lot of time examining the careers. Once lunch had finished, the tributes returned back to the training center. As Prick was about to head towards the survival station, Elmas of 1 challenged him to a wrestling match. Instead of refusing the challenge, Prick simply ignored him and walked over to the survival station, where he began to practice. When Khen came over and told him to wrestle Elmas, Prick simply told him that if he forced him, he would regret it after the interviews the following night. This seemed to shock Khen. However, he backed away slowly and told Elmas to find another station to do. Copassia seemed shocked at what had happened with Prick. However, she also seemed impressed. Instead of working in the survival station, she had picked up some axes and had begun to practice aiming them at various targets. As for Jordan, he had seemingly ignored Madison's advice, and had retired to the camouflage station, where he painted a variety of inappropriate images on the wall. Once the training staff had seen this, they immediately removed him from the training center and placed him in an isolation pod for the remainder of training. Meanwhile, Sydney had listened to Madison's advice and had walked over to the archery station. There, she learned to use the bow quickly, although it was deemed one of the harder to use weapons. Sydney managed to master the technique quickly, which seemed to even surprise the careers. By the end of training, she was able to hit multiple targets, albeit without much accuracy. The following day, the tributes were taken to the training center, where the training scores were assessed. The careers were scored highly, as they managed to pull off respectable 9s and 10s. Sydney managed to score a 7, for what was rumored to be a respectable display of archery and electricity. Jordan scored a 4, which was supposedly due to him somehow becoming inebriated during the assessments. As for Prick, he scored a 7, but due to his large fan base, not many citizens cared. Kopasia had also only scored a 5, for what was alleged to be work with different plants, but her score was also widely ignored, as most fans of District 7 seemed to be focusing on Prick. That night, Madison spent a lot of time talking with her tributes. In the apartment, Madison allegedly introduced the tributes to a mysterious individual named OL via her screen. Despite the multiple technology breaching attempts, peacekeepers were later unable to discover who this was. But at that time, it was passed off that OL was one of Madison's lovers. At the same time, Asha and the tributes from 7 engaged in a meeting with one of Asha's lovers, Obi. Although it seemed too coincidental that both Madison and Asha were having a meeting with their lovers and the tributes at the same time, the peacekeepers and digital guards dismissed it as no threat. The next night, the interviews were held in Dalton Studios. As usual, Lauren welcomed the audience and began the interviews in her signature, charismatic style. The career interviews all went by strongly. This year, the careers were noted to have made subtle references to Prick, most of which stated that they disapproved of him. This, however, seemed to make the tension around the audience uneasy, and therefore did not appear to help the careers gain popularity. After the bland interviews of the tributes from 5, Sydney walked onto the stage amidst light applause. Lauren immediately began by asking how she felt about her training score of a 7. To this, Sydney replied that she was prepared to win the games and to prove the District 6 doubters wrong. This caused mild applause within the audience. After a few other regular questions, Sydney was asked what she thought about the Capitol. To this, Sydney replied that she simply enjoyed the view from her apartment window, which triggered light cheering despite not being very loud. After Sydney, Jordan walked on stage. Jordan's interview was a disaster. When Lauren tried to ask him questions, he did not respond clearly, but instead mumbled unintelligible things. This caused Madison to sigh from the audience once Jordan was dismissed. During Kopasia's interview, not many audience members paid much attention, as most were waiting for Prick's interview. Those who did pay attention noticed that Kopasia spoke about her life in District 7, which was typical and seemed to bore Lauren. Almost everyone in Dalton Studios that night seemed pleased and excited when Lauren called Kopasia off the stage. Before Prick had even stepped forward towards the center of the stage, audience members began to chant Prick's name repeatedly. This seemed to unnerve him, however he smiled and waved nervously to the audience once he was on stage. After he had sat down, Prick and Lauren engaged in polite banter, in which every word was absorbed by the Prick content-thirsty audience. Following the banter, Lauren asked Prick what he thought about his many fans in the Capitol. To this, Prick replied that he would never give them up. This caused loud cheering within the audience, as audience members began to chant his name again. Lauren then asked what Prick had to say to his District 7, as well as to the people who had doubted District 7's victory for the past few years. Prick immediately stood up and stated that he would never let them down, and that he had a full commitment to the games. Cheers rose to a crescendo as Capitol viewers began to chant Prick's name again. It was also noticed that at this time, President Carty was watching from the back of the studio, and seemed to be nodding his head in approval, while also in deep thought. Once Prick had finally left the stage, the interviews continued as normal, but most audience members did not pay much attention to those that passed afterward. Unlike most other years, this year, GameMaker Blanco did not get interviewed. However, he did promise an exciting arena this year, which was well received by the Capitol. That night, Prick and Kotasia spent more time with Asha contacting Obi. However, after a while, Asha told Prick and Kopasia to rest well for the games the following day. As for Madison's tributes, they did not speak with anyone. Instead, Madison appeared to prepare Sydney for the following day's games, while Jordan ran to his room and dozed off before Madison could talk with him. In the morning, the tributes were taken to the arena holding rooms, where they were dressed in a light set of clothing, which matched their district colors. This clothing was also exceptionally bright, which seemed to confuse mentors, peacekeepers, and tributes alike. Prick was visited by Asha, who wished him luck in the games and to be expecting sponsors. Prick thanked Asha for not questioning all of his attention, before shaking hands with her and entering his tube. Asha then went to visit Copassia. In Copassia's holding room, Asha winked at Copassia before telling her to never forget something. Copassia nodded and sighed before shaking Asha's hand and entering her tube. In Jordan's holding room, he was not visited by anyone, which saw him dressed by himself and gloomily enter his tube. Inside his tube, Jordan sighed before performing a three-finger salute and leaning against the glass. Sydney was visited by Madison, who wished her luck in the games and to remember her promise. Sydney nodded and embraced Madison, who thanked her for not being an alcoholic. This caused Sydney to laugh as she stepped into her tube. The podiums then rose into the brightly lit cornucopia clearing. The 106th Games, or in year 120, took place on Neon Street. This year, the cornucopia lay in the center of a road. On either side of the road, there were many brightly lit shop windows and signs attached to the buildings. Inside the buildings, there lay many different types of shops, which could be accessed by tributes. On the sides of the road, multiple vehicles were also parked. Most of these vehicles were locked, and therefore inaccessible, but some of them had unlocked doors, with keys to the ignition hidden somewhere near the vehicle. The sky in this arena was set to constantly be dark, which meant that tributes would not be able to tell the time based on looking at the sky. Back in the cornucopia, viewers and tributes were shocked to see that there were no supplies in the cornucopia, except for 24 small sachets and a large pile of shiny golden coins. The arena was shaped like a rectangle, meaning that tributes only had access to the long street as well as the alleys, which all led into the perimeter. Sydney, of 6, was placed on a centered podium, which allowed her to overlook all the sachets and coins. As the countdown began from 20, she focused her attention on a sachet and seemed ready to run. Jordan, of 6, did not seem to be focusing on anything when his podium rose. Instead, he seemed tired and uninterested in what was happening around him. Prick, of 7, did not even look towards the cornucopia, but instead looked away towards the bright neon lights of the shops. Copassia, of 7, had focused her attention on the coins when she seemed ready to scoop up when the gong rang. As the countdown neared 0, Copassia suddenly turned towards Prick, but Prick did not notice Copassia, which saw the countdown hit 0 before Copassia could refocus her attention. Sydney immediately ran forwards and picked up a sachet, before filling it up with as many coins as she could. Lauren deemed her lucky, since the couriers had strategically attempted to take down some of their larger competition. As Sydney filled her sachet up, she began to run away. It was noticed that as she ran, Sydney passed Jordan's twitching body, but did not help Jordan whatsoever. Jordan had walked off his podium when the gong rang, seemingly oblivious to what was happening. But when Bulger of 9 ran over and punched him in the face, he screamed and fell to the ground, bleeding from the temple. Bulger then began to kick Jordan in the head, which saw Jordan scream even more. Eventually, Bulger ran away from Jordan's body and towards the pile of coins. As for Copassia, she had stopped to assess the carnage occurring around her first, before running forwards. As she ran, she seemed shocked to see the boy from 5 get bitten by Dovis of 2 in the neck, while Sapphire of 1 snapped the boy from 4's neck. Once Copacia had reached the cornucopia, she looked towards Cindy, who had just finished filling her sachet. Copacia immediately grabbed a sachet from the table where they were placed, and filled it up at the pile of coins. Once Copacia was done filling her sachet, she began to run, but screamed upon seeing the girl from Nine's body getting thrown towards her, after the girl had tried to run with a handful of coins, but instead was tackled, punched, and thrown by Elmas of 1. Copacia seemed nervous about continuing in this direction, after seeing Elmas start punching in Sulia of 5. Therefore, Copacia ran in the opposite direction, but stopped upon seeing Yunnan of 2, who was smashing the tributes from 10's heads into each other. Copacia appeared to panic, but quickly spotted a pathway without any tributes in the way. Therefore, she ran away from the bloodbath without getting attacked. Prick had immediately sprinted away from the bloodbath, towards a dark alley between 2 buildings. Prick looked around before running into the alley and hiding behind a trash can. From there, he waited until 7 cannons had sounded. Immediately after the final cannon had boomed out into the dark, empty night sky, Prick quietly begged for sponsors. Unsurprisingly, a large parachute floated down, which contained a purse filled to the brim with coins. Prick grinned before running towards a nearby building and entering it. This building was designed to be almost an exact replica of Lauren's company store, Red Rose Outfitters, but with a key difference. Instead of containing fashionable clothing on the racks, the store was stocked with camouflage outfits, body armor, and various other articles of clothing, which could provide an advantage for tributes in this year's arena. Game maker Blanco, who was currently spectating Prick with Lauren and Khen, stated that the idea of this year's games was to make the tributes buy whatever supplies they needed with the coins supplied in the cornucopia. This seemed to interest many viewers as cheers erupted in Snow Square. Upon entering the store, Prick began to look around in shock and amazement. He then opened his purse before looking around at the various items for sale. After some deciding, Prick settled on a set of body armor and slowly walked over to a machine. Lauren commented that Prick was intelligent to think of paying before leaving, as not paying in such an arena could lead to one's demise. The machine scanned the armor Prick was holding before displaying a large number 150 on the screen. Instead of counting out his coins, Prick dumped the entire purse into the machine's open slot. After a tense moment, there was a beep, followed by the light turning green. He grinned before putting on the body armor, grabbing a few extra coins that had rolled out of a change slot, and running out of the store. Meanwhile, Copacia had run into a nearby shop and noticed that it was a restaurant. She grinned before walking up to the counter where a screen had been placed. Khen told viewers that this screen was designed to be undestroyable. Therefore, tributes would not be able to hinder others from buying food. After Copacia had purchased an expensive bowl of soup, she began to exit the store. Unfortunately for her, the couriers were coming this way as well. Copacia heard the couriers and was lucky enough to have hidden behind a large plant just as they entered the store. Yunnan of 2 quickly stated that she was starving, before running up to the counter and selecting a large order of cooked chicken. She grinned as the chicken was ejected out of a large spot, amidst scoffing from the other couriers. As the couriers took turns to buy their food, Copacia quietly ran out of the shop and into an alley beside it. From there, she counted her money and was shocked to discover only 13 gold coins remaining. Copacia stashed her coins back into her sachet and hid in the alley for the remainder of the day, which proved to be a smart decision, as the couriers exited the restaurant shortly afterwards and traveled down the street to a different shop. Unlike most other tributes, Cindy had immediately taken her sachet and had run to a nearby car. Cindy pulled on the door and was unsurprised to see that it was locked. Therefore, Cindy did this to every other car on the alley, and after seeing that each of these cars was locked, she sighed before running to a nearby shop and hiding from other tributes. Inside the shop, Cindy pulled out her sachet and counted her coins. Cindy appeared to miscount and only counted 97, but in reality there were exactly 100 coins in her bag. Cindy then got up before running to a nearby counter in the shop. The shop she was in sold electrical equipment such as wires, batteries, and motors. Cindy did not seem to find any of the electrical equipment of much use. Therefore, she left the shop without purchasing anything. After some time scouring the street, Cindy walked into a shop which sold weapons. Cindy gasped, but noticed the couriers in the shop across the street. After some more gasping, she ran into the store, purchased a knife, and ran away. Shortly afterwards, the night outside the pitch-black arena began to fall, and the portraits of the boy from 4, the boy from 5, Insulia of 5, Jordan of 6, the girl from 9, and both tributes from 10 were shown in the sky. In the morning, Sydney was the first to awake and quickly stood up. From the alley in which she was hiding, she looked around, looking for nearby tributes, and after realizing there were none, she quickly ran out into the streets and into a nearby shop, which sold drinks. These drinks were designed to not be limited to water. Some provided tributes with a refreshing adrenaline boost, while others were pure poison. Because of her knife purchase from the day before, Sydney did not have enough coins in her bag. However, she seemed to have an idea. Sydney ran towards the cornucopia, where the careers were resting. Sydney gasped upon seeing the careers slowly start waking up, but quickly hid behind a car for the time being. Elmas of 1, who had stood guard, noticed his allies waking up, and quickly told them to rise and shine. As the remaining 3 careers stood up and looked and stretched, Elmas told them that they should hide the coins and go hunting for tributes together. The careers agreed, and despite multiple shouts in Snow Square, they hid the coins underneath a nearby car. Once the careers were safely out of sight, Sydney shouted in glee as she hastily filled her sachet to the brim with coins. After it was clear that her sachet could not contain any more weight, Sydney ran into a store across the street that sold trap parts. Inside the shop, Sydney bought a variety of different bear traps, strings, hooks, and sharp spikes, and camouflage material for the arena. She then walked outside and carefully began to set the tripwire around the car, which contained the coins underneath it. At that moment, 2 cannons sounded. Brooke woke up to a large pile of sponsor gifts sitting at his feet. All of them contained coins, which clearly frustrated Prick, but nevertheless, he thanked his sponsors. Prick then ran into a large warehouse and purchased a large backpack from a booth. He then stored all of his coins inside the backpack. He then ran to the second floor of the warehouse and gasped upon seeing a rack full of weapons. Prick ran to the weapon rack and grabbed an axe, before paying and running out of the store. After running outside, he noticed Bulger of 9 running to the warehouse. Bulger immediately stopped upon seeing Prick, and began to run the other direction. I know I'm pronouncing it differently. Prick grinned and threw his axe, which sliced Bulger's head cleanly off his neck. As Prick ran to retrieve his axe, he gasped upon hearing 2 cannons instead of 1. Therefore, he picked up his axe and darted into a nearby shop before any other tributes could potentially have seen him. As for Capacia, she had woken rather late, and after hearing the cannons, she shuddered within the dark alley where she had slept. Capacia noticed a hovercraft collecting a body from a nearby, so she went to check on it. Viewers had seen that Radish of 11 had been walking down the street when she was noticed by the careers. Due to the shape of this arena, she had no choice but to run into a nearby shop. Unfortunately for her, she was cornered in the shop, dragged out onto the street, and stabbed in the middle of the road. Capacia carefully looked around before deciding to head towards the cornucopia, in search of more supplies. As Capacia made her way to the cornucopia, Prick had entered the weapon shop Sydney had been in the day before. Because of all the money he had, Prick purchased a pair of very sharp dual axes. This clearly made Capital viewers happy, as Prick now had armor and a set of weapons. Prick then ran over to the restaurant, where he purchased a large lumberjack sandwich, as shown. Ken and Lauren both seemed shocked at the sheer size of the sandwich, while most viewers in Snow Square either cheered or gasped. Lauren explained that such sandwiches were only available to the rich in District 7, and although they were fit for Capital consumption, most Capital citizens preferred more light, sweet meals. Once Prick had taken a few bites out of his sandwich, he stuffed it in his backpack and ran over to a nearby supermarket replica. Inside the market, Prick purchased 2 large 1-liter water bottles, which clearly made many viewers in Snow Square seem relieved that Prick was doing so well in the games. He then ran outside, presumably in search of tributes. Meanwhile, Sydney had finished booby-trapping the vehicle which the coins were placed under, and after double-checking her work, she hid behind a nearby truck and waited. Once the careers had returned to the cornucopia, they seemed so focused on talking about their kill that they did not notice the thin, almost invisible tripwire in front of them. As they approached, Elmas of 1 suddenly tripped, which caused the spikes to fall onto his head. Once Elmas's cannon boomed out, Dovis of 2 pointed out the tripwire and immediately ran to disable it. However, he was too quick, and after fumbling the wire, a second set of spikes flew around from behind the car and smashed into his side. Dovis screamed and fell backwards onto the tripwire, which triggered the third and fourth sets of spikes to fly out. Cindy was clearly shocked and delighted to see the spikes detach from the wire due to Dovis's weight and fly into his head and into Yunnan of 2's stomach. Sapphire of 1, who was the only career remaining, screamed and ran behind the car, where she discovered the wiring mechanism Cindy had designed. But before she could do anything about it, Cindy had jumped out from behind her car and stabbed her in the neck. Cindy then walked around to Yunnan, who had removed the spikes from her stomach and was now slowly getting to her feet. As Cindy approached, Yunnan quickly pulled out her short sword and held it in front of her face. Cindy gasped at the weapon and began to back away. As Cindy backed away, she picked up one of the spikes, which were attached to pads. Using the spikes as a shield, Cindy reapproached Yunnan. Yunnan did not appear to panic, and instead, she simply backed away slowly and told Cindy that they would meet again. Yunnan proceeded to run away in the direction that the careers had headed earlier. Copacia had watched the scuffle at the cornucopia from behind a truck, and after seeing Yunnan running away in her direction and Cindy gathering more coins and running in the opposite direction, she quickly ducked underneath the truck, and fortunately was not seen by Yunnan. After Yunnan passed her, Copacia ran to the coin stash underneath the truck and gathered some coins, refilling her bag. She then ran to the supermarket Prick had run into earlier that day, presumably to buy some water, but at that moment a cannon boomed out. Prick had been walking down the street when a knife flew through the air and anchored deeply into his left arm. Fortunately for him, he had been wearing armor, and upon seeing Blood and Mia, both of 3, had thrown this knife, Prick grinned and ran towards them, dual axes at the ready. The pair from 3 screamed and threw another knife, but Prick deflected it with the blade of one of his axes and continued towards them. Within a few seconds, Prick had thrown his axe into Mia's back, which caused her to scream and fall to the ground in a pool of blood. As for Blood, he had sprinted in the direction of the cornucopia, and while Prick decapitated Mia, he hid underneath the truck, which allowed him to avoid being seen. Prick grinned at his kill and removed the knife, which was still stuck in his armor. Prick then ran to a nearby alley, where he hid for the remainder of the night. That night, the portraits of Elmas and Sapphire, both of 1, Dovis of 2, Mia of 3, Bulger of 9, and Radish of 11 were shown, which left 11 tributes remaining. In the morning, mutts were released into the arena. These mutts were not like those ever seen before. Each mutt was a different shape, size, and color. The mutts were set to roam the arena, but not to attack tributes unless provoked. Cindy had slept hidden within an alley and woke up upon hearing a loud cawing coming from above. She looked up and spotted a large metal bird, which was about 7 feet in height. Cindy appeared to panic, but she picked up her knife and ran into a nearby shop for cover. Inside the store, Cindy seemed shocked to discover that this store was unlike any of the others. Instead of containing any useful items on its shelves, the store was lined with a variety of extremely large berries. The berries varied in color and size, and were each placed in different parts of the shop. As Cindy examined the berries, a cannon sounded. Copacia had run towards the cornucopia after waking up, but after seeing a particularly large orange dragon-like figure flying towards her, she screamed and ran the opposite way. As the dragon closed in on her, she screamed twice and begged the game makers for mercy. However, Lauren quickly explained that the dragon would not attack unless Copacia had provoked it. Shortly afterwards, the dragon flew away from Copacia without attacking her, which seemed to relieve her. Meanwhile, Prick had run into a nearby warehouse, where he discovered Apa of 4 hiding. Prick laughed and threw both his axes into her head, which silenced her cannon before she could beg for mercy. Prick then laughed again and took her sachet, which contained only a meager 3 coins. Upon seeing only 3 coins, Prick laughed again and threw the sachet under the checkout machine. He then ran outside and listened to the echoes of the screaming tributes throughout the dark sky. After hearing Apa's cannon, Sydney had grabbed a large sky blueberry, which looked like a lot like a light blue strawberry. Upon examining it, Sydney purchased it for a whopping 100 coins, which was quite a lot of money. She clearly seemed to hope that it would be useful later on. After Sydney had walked outside the shop, she was shocked to see the night sky filled with a variety of different chaotic sounds. Upon seeing the chaos erupting, Sydney looked at the berry and took a small bite. She immediately spat it out and held it in her hand for the time being. As two more cannons boomed out within 20 seconds of each other, Sydney ran down the street to an area very close to the perimeter. Prick had sprinted through the streets to a restaurant. Inside the restaurant, he gasped upon seeing Ace and Dopa, both of 12, hiding. Both simultaneously screamed as Prick hurled his axes into their bodies. After both cannons sounded, Prick looted their supplies and was dismayed to find nothing of use. Therefore, he ran outside and looked for more victims. After the dragon had flown away, Copacia traveled to the perimeter, where more mutts roamed. At the perimeter, Copacia noticed a sword with a blue ribbon attached to it. Copacia immediately grabbed the sword, but before she could lift her arm up, the ribbon wrapped around her arm. As she screamed, a chemical was released from her tracker, which made her lose energy, and within seconds, Copacia had fallen into a deep coma. When she was near the perimeter, Sydney had discovered a large truck, and was delighted to find it unlocked. After some searching, she discovered the keys underneath the truck. She immediately plugged the keys into the ignition and blared the horn, alerting tributes to her presence. Unbeknownst to her, Copacia was unconscious just a few meters away from Sydney, but she did not know this. Sydney quickly drove the truck down the street and unknowingly crushed a starving pit of 11. It was only when his cannon sounded that Sydney swore and apologized to whoever she had crushed. She then continued to drive her truck down the road until she reached the cornucopia. With just 7 tributes remaining, Game Maker Blanco set the mutts in the arena to their hostile mode, which immediately surprised so many tributes. As Prick was walking down the street, he gasped upon noticing himself walking towards him. Prick seemed extremely surprised and cautious as he approached his replica. As Prick and Fake Prick approached each other, both stared intently into each other's eyes. Once they had finally approached, the fake Prick punched the real Prick in the face. The only thing louder than Prick's F-bomb was the sound of gasps and the shouts of no in the snow square. Prick immediately stood up and threw his axe into the replica's body. Surprisingly, instead of squirting out blood, the replica simply shapeshifted into an amorphous pink blob. Prick hastily slashed at the mutt with his other axe, and after confirming that it was no longer alive, he grabbed his axes and ran into a nearby shop. Because Copacia was unconscious, she was easy prey for a large purple lizard with a red stripe down its back, which crawled over her body and bit her neck. The poison in the lizard's bite quickly killed Copacia, and sounded her cannon within a few seconds. Now that the games had quickly shrunk down to the final 6, Lauren and Khen both made their predictions for Victor. Lauren stated that she thought Prick would win, as he had lots of money, but Khen stated that money wouldn't be everything in the games, and that he was betting on Sydney. At that moment, a cannon sounded. This cannon belonged to Blued of 3. After running out of supplies, Blued had grabbed a water bottle from a store, but without paying. Therefore, the second he left the store, an automatic turret shot him in the head with a bullet. These turrets were placed outside every store, and were designed to fire at any tributes that tried to steal from a store. Surprisingly, this had not been known or shown until now. With only 5 tributes remaining, Game Maker Blanco set the mutts on passive mode, and allowed the tributes to wander around the arena until midnight. Lauren commented that Weaver and Taddy, both of 8, were her favorites to win runner-up, if they continued to work together, but she also believed that they would turn on each other before the showdown. On the other hand, Khen stated that Prick had used the coins well, and despite the sponsor restriction that only allowed coins to be sent in the arena, he had managed to prove himself worthy of not only being a celebrity, but also a strong fighter. At midnight, the portraits of Blued of 3, Ava of 4, Copacia of 7, Pit of 11, and Ace and Dopa, both of 12, were shown. This left only Yunnan of 2, Sydney of 6, Prick of 7, and Weaver and Taddy, both of 8, remaining. the morning, the tributes were awoken by loud growls and various other animal noises coming from the perimeter. Cindy had woken up early and had eaten some food and drank some water. After finishing her food and most of her drink, she stretched and readied her knife. But unfortunately for her, she appeared to realize that she did not have a lot of supplies. At that moment, a large orange-red snail approached. The snail was like a normal snail, but about 25 times as big and with a large cracked shell that spewed magma. The snail spat out a large blob of magma, which Cindy dodged narrowly. Unfortunately, the magma flew through the air and landed on what appeared to be a small yellow mouse. The mouse was much like a normal mouse, except electric shocks seemed to be coming from its cheeks and tail, and that it was yellow. As the mouse squealed, Cindy grabbed her water bottle, which still had a small amount of water in it. Cindy dumped the rest of the water on the snail, which caused the snail to let out a groan of agony before collapsing dead. Cindy then walked over to the mouse, which was now rolling on the ground, seemingly unsure of what to do. Cindy pulled out the light blue strawberry from earlier and placed it down on the ground. After an awkward moment, she left the alley where the mouse was, pulled the keys to the truck from her pocket, and hopped into the driver's seat of the truck. Before she could start the engine, the mouse jumped onto the top of the truck and started tapping on the window. Cindy hastily lowered the window, and the mouse got in, where it curled up on Cindy's shoulder as she drove to the cornucopia. Prick had only awoken when he heard Cindy's truck drive by. He quickly ate all of his remaining food and grabbed his axes before running to the cornucopia. As he traveled, he heard a cannon sound. Prick jumped and looked around, but the only thing he could see was a black dog that was seemingly breathing fire. With a collar shaped like a skull, the dog bounded towards Prick, who quickly began to run again. When it became clear that the dog was faster than Prick, many viewers in Snow Square began to gasp and shout. But just when it looked like the dog was about to bite Prick, he suddenly turned around and decapitated it. This caused many cheers in Snow Square as Prick ran to the cornucopia and hid behind a car. From behind the car, he noticed the body of Taddy of 8 getting retrieved by a hovercraft. This was because Taddy had been attacked by a large purple bat, which had flown down and bit her shoulder. After a while, Weaver of 8 noticed Taddy turning green, and therefore quickly put her out of her misery. With only 4 tributes left, and all of them hiding around the cornucopia, Game Maker Blanco quickly triggered his trump card disaster. At that moment, the arena began to shake. From one side of the rectangular-shaped arena, a large tidal wave began to rise, while on the other side, lava began to flow down the road. As this happened, a large, peculiarly shaped whale rose from the tidal wave and squirted water down the road, while on the other side of the arena, a monster which appeared to look like the ground appeared. The ground monster stomped, causing a massive stone formations to erupt from the ground. At that moment, all remaining tributes simultaneously realized that it would be a smart idea to enter the cornucopia. As the showdown erupted, cheers in Snow Square reached a game's high. Yunnan of 2 quickly threw a knife at Cindy, but she dodged it and began to run around the cornucopia, looking like she wanted to stall out time. Prick had run towards both Yunnan and Weaver, but did not look at Cindy. After some thinking, Prick ran towards Yunnan, who threw a knife at him. Prick dodged the knife, and once he was close enough, he threw an axe, which hit Yunnan in the heart. Yunnan screamed before her cannon sounded, which saw Prick retrieve his axe and look at Cindy. As Prick sprinted towards Cindy, she screamed, but at that moment, Weaver threw a bomb-like item, which exploded at Prick's feet. Prick screamed as his body was blown 20 meters into the air, and after what sounded like an eternity, his cannon sounded at his body hit the ground. Viewers in Snow Square gasped and shouted a large variety of curses at Weaver, but a lot of others were now cheering Cindy on. Weaver grinned and prepared a sword before telling Cindy calmly that there was no way she would be able to defeat him and his sword with a knife. Cindy appeared to realize this, but kept her composure as Weaver approached her. Once Weaver was 5 meters away from Cindy, he stopped and asked her what she thought about the arena. Cindy looked at him and told him that she liked the constant darkness. Weaver opened his mouth to respond, but at that moment, the mouse that Cindy had discovered earlier jumped from the top of the cornucopia and onto Weaver's head, where he was shocked with 1,000 volts of electricity. Weaver immediately collapsed, and his cannon sounded as he hit the ground. Game maker Blanco then announced that Sydney Quain was the victor of the 106th Hunger Games. Sydney then seemed extremely confused as the mouse bounded back into her lap. Sydney had not sustained any injuries in the arena, and therefore she was dismissed from the Gull Hospital after her mandatory victors checked up. She was taken to the accommodation center, where she embraced Madison and started rambling about how surprised she was at winning the games. She was also informed that many capital citizens were happy with her victory, since she had killed Prick's killer. This seems to confuse and surprise her at the same time. However, she later described that it felt too good to be real. For her victor's interview, Sydney wore a black dress to represent the dark sky of the arena. She also wore a diamond necklace, which was shaped in a lightning bolt. Lauren greeted her, and the usual questions followed, which Sydney stuttered while answering. It seemed clear that she was shocked at what was happening. When Lauren asked what the Capitol should do with the mouse, Sydney told her that it should be taken care of and given an enjoyable long life. Lauren laughed and promised to do so. She then asked Sydney how she felt about winning. Sydney stated that she did not deserve to win, and that she had only won by luck. However, this statement was met with lots of loud sounds of disagreement from the audience, which seemed to put a smile on her face. When her interview was concluded, there was much applause, and game maker Blanco stepped on stage to be interviewed as well. Game maker Blanco stated that he had enjoyed placing the items in the shops more than he had enjoyed designing the arena. And when pressed by Lauren for fun facts about the games, he simply stated that he had been inspired by his niece's drawings to create the mutts. After another large round of applause, the interviews were concluded. Sydney later returned home to District 6, after attending only a few parties. She was known to have had a varying personality. She returned to the capital for later years to party and mentor tributes. She also formed a strong bond with Madison Hawker, and later played a crucial role in the capturing of District X. And that is it for this episode, Tributes. I know a lot of you are asking me, when am I gonna end this series? I'm thinking about ending it somewhere near 125. But please do not get so certain. It may go on for longer. It may go on for less longer. That's not even a word. But I'd like to thank all of you for your support, and I'm sorry for not uploading, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you, everyone.